Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created.
Hello, family. It is a great honor to be a part of this Kingdom Crew Conference. It's something that has already been a very big blessing to me in terms of the clarity it's brought me with diving deeper into something I've talked about before. And it has to do with where we are in time and also what's about to happen and how to prepare for what's about to happen. Because it's one thing to understand everything in the Bible and have all this knowledge, but it's another thing to apply that and change the way we live. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started with this presentation that I will be calling The Generations of the Heavens and the Earth, because that's what it's about, showing us what that means and where we are in time. And so the generations of the heavens and earth really come alive when we listen to the words of Peter as well as the prophets, because he's telling us to do exactly that here in 2 Peter. He says, I write unto you in both which I stir up in your pure minds by way of remembrance, that ye may be mindful of the words which were spoken before by the holy prophets, and of the commandment of us, the apostles of the Lord and Savior, knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lust, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? And then a couple verses later, he says, but beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. And so he wants us to be mindful of the prophets, what they say, and also to not be ignorant of one thing, and it has to do with a day being as 1,000 years. This changes everything, especially when you look at what the prophecy in Hosea is telling us. And in this particular prophecy, it's talking about days. And it made no sense to me when I first read this, because I didn't have that understanding. My wife, she understood this and was looking into this, and is really the one who got me looking into this. And so I want to say a quick thank you to my wonderful wife before I get too deep into this. She has been a major blessing to me and our family with all of her wisdom and all of the Bible studies that she does with me. She's one of those who just really is passionate about the word. And it's been a major blessing having someone like that to have this walk with. So I know she may or may not watch this, but I wanted to say thanks and thank the Father for blessing me with a great wife to help me get to where I am today. All right. So to get back on track, with this study, this prophecy in Hosea says that after 2 days he will heal us. In the third day we shall arise and live before him and shall know him. That's starting to sound a lot like the new covenant when everyone knows him. And then it says, let us follow on to know the Lord. We shall find him ready as the morning, and he will come to us as the early and latter rain to the earth. So we have the third day and a raising up, similar to what we hear when we read verses about the resurrection. And so this still makes no sense until you start looking at things back in Genesis right here, because you have Adam receiving a commandment by the Most High when he says, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. And so when I heard this as a child, I thought, man, if he eats that, he's going to die that day. Well, he eventually ends up eating of the fruit. We all know that. And when I used to look at this story, I always pictured Eve just kind of wandering off, being lost and getting away from Adam, and him not being there to stop her when she was eating of this. I don't believe that's the case, because when you look at books like Jubilees, it tells us they were in the garden for like 7 years. So they knew where the tree was. It wasn't like she was lost and roaming around when this happened. They were in the garden for quite some time, and there was harmony. Animals could talk. There was a language of creation. That's why she wasn't freaked out when a serpent's talking to her, and neither was Adam. This was not like a Dr. Dolittle scene. This was literally the norm. Animals talking. And so you have this serpent who was said to be craftier than all the other animals. And what he said to the woman was that you should not surely die. Literally the opposite of what the Most High was saying. For God doth know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her. So it's not like he's off somewhere. He is with her. So she eats of it. And I'm sure, I don't know about Adam personally, but if I'm there and I literally just watched my wife eat of something I was commanded not to because I would die that day, and I see that she's not dying instantly, might be a good idea to wait until the next day. But I think Adam sounds like he just ate it right then. He didn't wait for sunset or anything like that. Went ahead, gave into that temptation. And then you have Adam going on to live many, many years after he ate of that fruit. So he didn't die that day. And we know the Most High doesn't lie. And we know that serpent wasn't telling the truth. So something is missing. And this is a confusing story until you read the book of Jubilees, because it says here in Genesis that Adam lived to be 930 years. And when you read Jubilees, it says the exact same thing, but it says that Adam lacked 70 years of 1,000 years. For 1,000 years are as one day in the testimony of the heavens, and therefore was it written concerning the tree of knowledge, on the day that ye eat thereof, ye shall die. For this reason, he did not complete the years of this day. So just like Peter was telling us, the years of this day, it was 1,000-year period that we don't need to be ignorant of. And that puts us near the end of that first millennium, which would be about 3000 BC. And you can see, and we are approaching the seventh day, or what I like to call the seventh millennial day. And I want to clarify that when I am calling these millennial days, I'm not saying that creation was a 7,000-year period or a 6,000-year period with a day of rest at the end. Creation days were literal morning and evening days. However, in the testimony of the heavens, time is different. And I believe that's why it says right there in Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, that these are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created. It says it right there in the beginning. This is something I read past many times, having no clue what it meant. But after looking into this, I'm almost 100% certain that's what it's referring to, the generations of the heavens and the earth. And just the other day, to back this up a little bit, we were reading the book of Enoch and doing a study. And what we saw when you get up into chapter 87 was that Enoch, before he saw the future, it says he was taken up away from the generations of the earth. So he's going up above the generations of the earth, and now he can see all the things, like it says here, that will befall those elephants, camels, and asses. Okay, and if you're not familiar with this vision, those three creatures were a reference to the Nephilim, the three races of giants. And so they eventually became unclean spirits. And so it's also talking about the stars, which were the fallen, and all of those in the mix. And so you have the fallen and the offspring of the fallen. And so Enoch was able to see all these things all the way up to the new heaven and earth. And so now that he's able to see that, the only way you could see that, of course, his is in a vision. It's not like a literal, he's seeing it all like a fast forwarding movie. He's seeing it in the form of a vision. But I thought it was interesting that it says he went up above the generations of the earth. So it sounds like it could be talking about this. I'm not 100% sure. Sounds like it. And then we have another witness here in Jubilees telling us that Enoch here, it says, for there, referencing the Garden of Eden, he was set as a sign, and that he should testify against all the children of men, that he should recount all the deeds of the generations until the day of condemnation. But I feel that this is why it says, these are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created. So you have literal days. The world was literally created in 6 days, with the seventh day being a day of rest. And it was the only day of those 6 days that was blessed. And so it's a significant day, that seventh day of rest, in terms of the chapter of our timeline when you look at the generations of the earth. And so I want to call each of these 1,000-year periods a millennial day to make it simple. So millennial day, I'm referring to these 1,000-year periods that we have throughout time that show us where we are now. And to go back to that prophecy in Hosea, I know we're jumping around a lot, but to go back to that prophecy in Hosea, you have that first day being 1,000 years, and it's not until the fourth millennial day that we have this prophecy in Hosea. So why is he talking about a third day? Well, this prophecy was given before Yeshua arrives and resurrects. And so the people of that time had no clue that the calendars were going to change and that it was going to start over, giving us a new first day in terms of how we're measuring 1,000-year periods. So it's fascinating, the foreknowledge from that prophecy to say that, and the only way for it to be fulfilled is for those days to start over. And so the fifth day is now the new first day. And so that changes things, because he said in the second day is when we're going to be revived, or after 2 days, he will revive us. And in the third day, he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. And so you have this new third day, which is also the seventh day. So don't let that be confusing. This is something that a lot of people will get lost on when you start having a third day and a seventh day overlapping. Keep it simple. It's still the seventh day. The seventh day doesn't change. A lot of people, when I talk about this, and I've talked about it before, said, so you're saying the Sabbath is no longer the Sabbath? It's like on a Tuesday or a month? No, I'm not saying anything like that. But as far as this prophecy goes, the new third day is the seventh day. It's the same thing, okay? But we are approaching that third day, and there's some things in the Word that are mind-blowing when you start seeing the parallels to all of this. And so that being raised up, like we said earlier, to me sounds a lot like the resurrection, us being raised up in that third day. And so when you go back to these prophecies about this resurrection, you see a lot of them. And this one says, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. So that was in 1 Corinthians, but now we go to 1 Thessalonians, very similar language. It's the same prophecy pretty much. And it says, for the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God. And the dead in Christ shall rise first. So there's that being raised up. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up, or raised up, like in Hosea, together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. So the first resurrection, the one that if you're a part of it, you don't die the second death. That's what this sounds like it's talking about to me. And the language is very similar to that of the prophecy in Hosea. You even hear the Messiah talking about this sound of a trumpet, where he says, and he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So we just heard a lot of talk of trumpets and being raised up. However, it's telling us that there's a last trumpet. And this made me think, what was the first trumpet? How many trumpets have there been? So many different questions you have when you're looking at this stuff and going, okay, where are we? So there had to have been another trumpet. If there's a last one, there had to have been a previous trumpet, at least one or two or three, who knows? And when you go back and look for that first trumpet, you find that it happened at a significant time in history, because it says the Lord, this is the Lord talking to Moses, says, "Lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud," there's the cloud again, "that the people may hear when I speak with thee and believe thee forever." And Moses told the words of the people unto the Lord, and the Lord said unto Moses, "Go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes and be ready against the third day. For the third day, the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai." And guess what happens? Guess what happens on that third day? It says, when it came to pass, here's what happened. The third day in the morning, remember the prophecy in Hosea talked about him being ready as the morning? It says, on the third day in the morning, that there were thunders and lightning and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet. So there's our first trumpet right there, exceeding loud, just like it says in the prophecies of the return, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled. How cool is that? You literally have the third day being referenced. Okay. And if that's not enough, here's where it gets interesting. Check this out. The third millennial day is when this happened. So you have the Father dropping clues for us throughout the entire Bible as to where we are in time. And like Peter says, he's not slack on his promise. When he says he's going to do something, he does something. And like we just saw, he did what he said he was going to do. And he came down to the mountain with a thick cloud on the third day. So the trumpet, the clouds, all of these things happening on the third day. And so that new third day, here we are about to enter it, and we're going to enter the start of it, or what would be called the morning of the third day. And it is the new third day, which is also the seventh day, a day of rest. And so this would be a great time for the millennial reign. And this conversation about this is nothing new. I'm not the first one to talk about it. It's sort of going viral now. I think the Messiah 2030 came out and just took off because they explained it in a really cool way. But this is something that I feel is a game changer for many reasons, because we see that that millennial reign period is for 1,000 years. It tells us that those who were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, that they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. It then goes on to say that the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. So what's coming up, where we're about to be in time, is that first resurrection. And it says, blessed and holy is he that hath power in the first resurrection. On such the second death has no power, but they shall be priests of Yah and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So repeating what I'd already said in verse 4, verifying what's about to happen. And guess what? The enemy will be bound during that 1,000-year period, and he's going to be loosed for a little season. A lot of people think we're in that little season right now. I mean, a lot. I get this brought up every time I mention a little season. And so it seems very possible when you start first thinking about it, like, well, yeah, we are all being deceived right now. We've been deceived about what we live on. We're deceived by so many different organizations. Maybe we are. They've lied about everything. However, the deceptions that take place during the little season is what lets us know that we're not in the little season, because it's going to be a purpose behind these deceptions. And so to give you a snapshot of what this looks like, we have that seventh day coming up, which I believe will be a good time to start the millennial reign with the Messiah. And you have the enemy being bound for that exact same amount of time, 1,000 years. However, when he is let loose, it says when those 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about. So they're going to be going around the camp of the saints. No matter how they deceive us, we can't go around the camp of the saints because the camp of the saints isn't here yet. There has to be a millennial reign going on. Okay, a lot of people say the millennial reign happened and everything left, but no, there's a camp still here. There's a camp of the saints. And it says, in the beloved city. And so they're encompassing this city and the camp. And what happens next is fire comes down from God out of heaven and devours them. So all those that are coming against the Most High and his people are going to be destroyed with fire. I have no clue how the evil one is going to deceive people into doing something like this. But one way is to get them to forget about that pillar of fire. The Egyptians looked directly at this pillar of fire and still pressed on. It's not hard for a crafty enemy to trick large amounts of people into falling for the same deceptions over and over again. And so you have this pillar of fire. And then after that, this is after the flood when you have the pillar of fire, because he promised us he would never flood the earth again. But that fire has rained down many times, like we see in Genesis, where Sodom and Gomorrah, they had brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, just like it spoke of in that Revelation prophecy, fire from heaven. And then again in Exodus, you have hell and fire mingled coming onto the land of Egypt. And of course, with Elijah, you have fire again coming down from above, lighting the sacrifice. And then again, you have fire again here in 2 Kings, this time coming down from heaven and consuming 50 people. So I urge all of you to remember that pillar of fire by night that was not only protecting them, but guiding the people out of Egypt. That pillar of fire was so powerful that there is still evidence of this fire. It literally melted the ground on the shoreline where the Red Sea crossing happened. And it takes some hot temperatures to do this, over 3,000 degrees to melt sand and soil. And that's what you have, literally stones infused in melted soil and sand. You can even see the puddles. They're like glass puddles. How awesome is that? Proof that that pillar of fire did in fact come. And so that's the pillar of fire that we all need to be mindful of, and remember that that same pillar of fire is with us as we are leaving Egypt yet again, coming out of these Babylonian practices, false teachings, religions, branches of Christianity that have formed thanks to all the work done just a few hundred years after the Messiah resurrected. It took a lot of work to get us to where we have been, as far as the deceptions and the thousands and thousands of denominations and all of that, the dividing and the conquering that we have seen throughout time with believers. However, it is a blessing to be set free yet again, just like he set his people free back then. And so that's the pillar of fire. But it takes me now to the cloud that we also need to remember. The cloud is significant. Remember, when the Father came down to Mount Sinai, there was a cloud. When the Messiah returns, there's a cloud. When he left after the resurrection, what received him? It was a cloud that received him. So you have this cloud being significant, and like many things in the Bible, we overlook it. But what was its purpose? Well, for one, it says here, this is a command to Moses from the Most High. The Lord said to him, "Go down, charge the people, lest they break through unto the Lord to gaze, and many of them perish." So the cloud was so that they couldn't see him. He didn't want people breaking through to see him and his great glory, because it would kill them. It would overwhelm them. They would die. And so you have this cloud preventing the people from dying. That's a great thing to do, shielding them from his magnificent presence that would overwhelm and kill them. I mean, just the brightness, I couldn't imagine. So you would need this cloud when he came down to the mountain to keep them from, like it says here, gazing in and perishing. So that was the original purpose of that first cloud with the first trumpet. Now we're waiting on another cloud and another trumpet and the Messiah, and it tells us every eye will see him, right? Because the truth of what we live on makes that possible. But every eye will see the Messiah. And when you look at what the Messiah says with his return and the clouds of heaven, it's something that brought a lot of anger to the ones judging him, because all he said was, hereafter shall you see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. So there's those clouds. And speaking of those clouds, it's quite controversial talking about clouds. It made the priest so angry that he rent his clothes and said, he hath spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Behold, now you have heard his blasphemy, talking about them clouds. What think ye? They answered and said, he is guilty of death. What would make them so angry? Because after that, it says they spit in his face and buffeted him, and others smote him with the palms of their hands, saying, prophesy unto us, thou Christ, who is he that smote thee? So they are so angry. They're hitting him, spitting on him, ripping their clothes because he talked about the clouds. And when I first read this, I thought, why were they so angry at him talking about this? Well, you go back to Daniel, the prophecy that they're probably familiar with, and it says, I kept watching the night visions when I saw, coming with the clouds of heaven, someone like a son of man. He approached the Ancient One and was led into his presence. So you have the Messiah being led into the presence of the Ancient One, the Most High. To him was given rulership, glory, and a kingdom, so that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His rulership is an eternal rulership that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. So you have the Messiah's words being very similar to that. And where it gets interesting is when you look at other translations about what Yeshua says, and he tells us that in the Hebrew translation that I found when I translated it to English, that you would see him sitting at the right hand of God and coming with the clouds of heaven. So not the right hand of power this time. And then this made me look elsewhere, and I found a Hebrew version of Matthew that is alleged to be older than the modern day versions that we have. And it says, I say to you, you have yet to see the Son of God sitting at the right of the power of God, coming on the clouds of heaven. And so, totally different than just the right hand of power. Now I think I see why the priest was so angry he was ripping his clothes apart, because he's telling him he's the fulfillment of that prophecy in Daniel, or he's going to be the fulfillment of that prophecy. That made them angry. They're like, all right, now we got to take him out, because he's saying he's literally the Messiah. And I don't know. I still don't know why that would make you angry. If somebody said that, I'd be like, you believe that? That's fine. Prove it. But this made them angry. And me saying this now makes most of Christianity angry, because they think the Messiah is coming back alone. But remember the purpose of the cloud. The purpose of the cloud was so that it could keep people from gazing at the Most High and dying. People have already seen the beloved Son. When he returns, every eye is going to see him. I believe purpose of the cloud stays the same. There's also the trumpet of God. Okay. I always believed that, maybe it was an archangel or the Messiah blowing this trumpet. And there's verses that kind of make it look like it's the Messiah that's blowing the trumpet. But what if it's the Most High blowing his own trumpet? It's the trumpet of God, and it's the breath of life being blown out of this trumpet. Imagine a resurrection taking place. Wouldn't be that hard to fathom when you have the breath of life blowing out of a trumpet. How great would that be? Okay, so this is something to think about for those of you who have never looked into this topic. This is something that I feel is powerful, and it's missing from a lot of people's understanding of the return. And it's something that has really changed the way I view the return. And the chapter after that, the millennial reign, but that's not the end. The millennial reign is not the end. Like we saw earlier, there's a judgment that happens. There's the little season, and then there's the fire from above, and a judgment, and you have the new heaven and the new earth that is the next chapter. And so we're going to be looking at some parallels that show us the significance of that. And it brings us back to the days of creation, with the first week of creation, according to Genesis and Jubilees, being exactly the same. However, there were things that happened after that seventh day of rest. And this is where my view of Genesis changed significantly. And it was after I started looking at it for this study again in more detail and seeing that it talks about things after that seventh day of rest. The garden being watered, Adam being placed into the garden. In other words, when he was made, he wasn't made in the Garden of Eden. He was made in Eden, and he was later placed into the Garden of Eden. And so I started asking questions. I was talking to my wife, walking down the road, and I said, if Genesis was retelling events after that seventh day of rest, how did he name all those creatures in one day? Because this is a man we're talking about, Adam. It's not the Most High. How did he name millions of organisms in one day? And so thinking about that question, I get back home after our walk and I start looking at Jubilees to see if what I'm thinking could be the case is actually the case. And come to find out, he named those different animals in the second week of creation. So he named the beast on the first day. Then he named the cattle on the second day, the birds on the third day, and all that moves on the earth on the fourth day. And then he named that which moves in the waters on the fifth day, which parallels the real fifth day of creation, where what did he make that day? Things that move in the water. And so the sixth day, which also parallels where he made man on the sixth day, is when he makes Eve from Adam's rib. And so that makes a lot of sense, because in Genesis you see that he's named all these creatures and he still doesn't have a wife. Well, then she's made from his rib. This is not another creation day. A lot of people say, oh, you're saying that, oh, he couldn't create everything in 6 days. He needed a whole other day of creation. Not what I'm saying, because making someone from existing flesh is not a day of creation. That's why when he called dry bones to come alive, it's not considered another day of creation. This is the exact same thing. You have existing flesh getting added flesh to it. He's not creating it. The flesh was already there. He's just adding to what he already has. And so Eve being made on week 2, day 6. So it's a pretty cool parallel to the original 6 days of creation. And then that seventh day being a day of rest. And then you have them placed into the garden at their own times. It was a little bit longer of a wait for Eve than it was for Adam. Not going to get into those numbers. But that brings us back to the new heaven and the new earth, because we aren't going into the new heaven and the new earth until when? After the seventh day, or the seventh millennial day. So Adam didn't go into the garden until after the seventh day. We're not going into the new heaven and earth until after the seventh day. So it gives us a really good parallel to our chapter, or the generations of the heaven and the earth, as it calls it in Genesis. And so if that's not enough, we're going to get deep into another parallel story of this, because we know Moses didn't enter the promised land. The Most High did come down in the morning of the third day to be with them. However, it was Joshua that entered the promised land. Guess when it happened? Probably already guessed it. It says he rose early in the morning, and they removed from Shittim. That's the same type of wood they made the Ark of the Covenant out of, by the way. And they came to the Jordan, he and all the children of Israel, and lodged there before they passed over. And it came to pass, when? After 3 days. That is crazy. So remember, the morning of the third day, or the start of the third day, was when the Father came down to the mountain. And now they're going into that promised land after 3 days. And it says that the officers went through the host, and they commanded the people, saying, when you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, and the priest, the Levites, bearing it, then you shall remove from your place and go after it. Check this out. He then says, yet there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it, that you may know the way by which you must go, for you have not passed this way before. We have never entered into that promised land in terms of the new heaven and earth. And it says there is a space between them, 2,000 cubits. What if those cubits are symbolic of the 2,000-year period in reference to that Hosea prophecy after the resurrection? Could be. I'm not saying it is. It's just my thoughts here. And that the Ark of the Covenant represents the millennial reign. And so, just to give you a snapshot of that, you have Israel entering the promised land. When did that take place? It took place on the end of the millennial third day, something that I feel is significant, showing us that the Father left us a roadmap to what's ahead. And if that's not significant enough, you have the resurrection, and he repeated this over and over, that the third day he shall rise again. And we know he rose again that third day. It is a huge part of salvation, believing in the resurrection. There's a resurrection to come, and there's the resurrection that has already happened, with the Messiah being the first to resurrect. Even in Luke chapter 13, you have the Messiah saying something that sounds a lot like the prophecy in Hosea when he says, "Behold, I cast out devils and I do cures today." So there's cures. Remember, it said he will heal us. "I do cures today and tomorrow, and the third day I shall be perfected." So this is very similar to his talk of rising again on the third day. That's some powerful stuff, but the parallels continue to get deeper when we look at the first 3 days of creation, the events that happened, and compare them to the new first, second, and third millennial days. And so the fifth millennium, sixth millennium, and the seventh is something that really makes this come alive. But you have to understand what the waters represent in prophecy and compare that to what we have here. Because in Revelation, when you have a vision that's showing us what's going to happen in the future, we're told that the waters in the vision represented peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Well, with that understanding of what the waters represent, I'm not saying this didn't really happen in Genesis with his spirit moving over the waters, but when you look at that, his spirit moving upon the face of the waters and him creating light, separating it from darkness, what happened in that fifth millennial day? You have his spirit moving upon the peoples, multitudes, languages, and literal tongues. That's something that happened. People were speaking different languages, and this separated us from darkness. This outpouring of the Spirit gave us a chance to really be set apart in a brand new way. And then that second day, he made the firmament. It divided the waters. And you see the second day, the people are being divided. We have tens of thousands of religions springing up, so much division taking place. In that third day, what happened to the waters? This is where it gets cool. Those waters were gathered together, or as God says, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place. And this dry land appearing is going to be the millennial kingdom that's appearing. How awesome is that? Those are some really cool parallels, and I feel they give us a roadmap that shows us where we are headed in time, as well as where we're at in time, or pretty close to it. I know there's some deceptions out there. Calendars have changed. Everyone's debating calendars right now, but this stuff is fascinating and just not at random. I would say at random, but several months ago, maybe even a year ago, I found a video that was looking at where we are in time based on the calculations of an old Bible from the 1800s. And so I looked at it and I gave the numbers, of course, to my wife, who's like a mathematician. She's a math teacher. She's really smart. And I said, where does this put us at right now? Because this Bible from 1814 said that the world was 5,788 years, 6 months, and 10 days old at that time in 1814. And so how old does that make the earth now? Well, she did the math. And if these dates are correct, it's 5,997 years since creation, according to this Bible. Not saying it's correct, just that if it's close, if they were right back then, if they had, better ways of calculating this than we do now, that's crazy. Like we are a couple years away, 2.5 years, because I don't know the exact date. All I know is it was 1814. And so it could have been 1814 right before 1815, or it could have been the very start of 1814. I don't know. I'd have to actually have that particular Bible and see if it gave a date. All I have is a screenshot from a video, so it's kind of blurry. But that is something to think about and understand that that's right next to that new millennial day. And I feel that there's a reason the Spirit's moving people to look into this. We need to understand it, and we need to be ready for that new third day. And so how can we be ready for that new third day? That's what matters. Knowing where we are is not going to change anything if we don't change and get people ready for what's to come. Even if it's 100 years from now, or, like in the Messiah's time, a couple thousand years away, there was an urgency. We need to live with that same urgency. We need to be ready and getting people ready. And so what does that mean? Well, this takes us to some verses that I want to share that are significant into actually where we are now. And it comes from 2 Timothy, where it says, keep away from godless babbling, from those who engage in it will only become more ungodly, and their teaching will eat away at people like gangrene. Hymenaeus and Philetus are among these. They have missed the mark as far as the truth is concerned, by saying that our resurrection has already taken place. This is something that people are saying now. The resurrection's already happened. We're in the little season. So that's fascinating to me that even back then they were saying that we've all missed out on the resurrection, and people were being led astray. And, I'm saying this out of kindness to those of you who are falling for that, or, believing that, or even teaching that, to really pray about this and ask the Father, are we really in the little season? Show me the truth, and use things like this to guide me. His word is a roadmap. He's been dropping clues as to where we are and telling us how to live. And his truth has been trampled on by so many false teachings out there that have misled many. And so that's why it tells us to keep away from those godless babblings. And so after it talks about these people who are telling others that the resurrection is taking place, it says they are overturning some people's faith. Nevertheless, God's firm foundation stands stamped with these words: the Lord knows his own, and let everyone who claims he belongs to the Lord stand apart from wrongdoing. That was 2 Timothy, powerful words. But to get back on track as to how to be prepared for the third day, that's something that's important, and it's something that is not easy. And when you try your best to get ready, the world is not going to be happy about it. We have been conditioned and programmed our entire lives to live a certain way, and that way is not the exact same way that we're instructed to walk. And we are instructed to walk in a certain way, and it's following the steps of the Messiah. Or like it says in 1 John, he that saith he abideth in him ought himself also so to walk, even as he walked. And that begs the question, which steps do we avoid? Because I hear a lot of different opinions on how we're supposed to walk. A lot of people say, avoid the steps where he's keeping the law, because we're not supposed to do that. And I was one of those people that used to believe that way. However, if I avoid those steps and he always kept the law, how many footprints am I really stepping in? If he prayed often and we're not doing that, we're missing one of his footsteps. He was persecuted. He kept the Sabbath. He ate clean foods. He walked in the Spirit. There were miracles happening around him because of the authority he was using, the same authority that we have. And he preached the gospel of the kingdom. He did all these things, and we're told that this is a narrow path. And it's a narrow path because nearly half the world is just focused on having faith, and the other half is just focused on keeping the commandments. You have two halves, nearly, and a small percent on that narrow path are the ones that the dragon will make war with, and it's those that keep the commandments and, there's an and here, have the testimony of Jesus Christ. There's both. I know people get angry on both sides. You get a lot of hate when you start talking about this. There's a growing number of people who are understanding it's about both, and it's a narrow path for a reason, because it's easy, like we've seen with the Pharisees, to make the commandments and just the law itself its own little idol, to where it wasn't about love. It wasn't about loving the Most High with all their hearts. They fell into the traditions of men and really tainted the image of what it means to be righteous. And so you have that narrow path and the Messiah's own words, what he's going to tell us in the future, if we are one of those he tells to depart. You don't want to be one of those people, but if you are, this is what he's going to say. I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. We want to know what those people are practicing, and that word lawlessness means the utter disregard for God's law, his written and living word. So if you utterly disregard something, why would he want to write it on your heart? Why would the Most High say, I'm going to write this on your heart in the new covenant? Meanwhile, completely disregard it and hate it, which I remember I was one of those who really thought this was going back to old ways. However, my mind is starting to change on these things. The more I look into it and the more I look at the entire word, because there's going to be a time, like it said, where the Messiah is going to say, depart from me, and we want people to be ready. So it's a narrow path for a reason, and so we want to be those that the dragon will make war with. And it's not just the commandment keepers, it's not just the ones that have faith, it's the ones that have both. It's not the easiest of tasks. I don't want to make it sound simple, but the main thing is we have an example, those footsteps to follow. And like it says in the book of Acts, unto you first, God having raised up his son, Jesus, sent him to bless you in turning away every one of you from his iniquities. So the Most High didn't just raise up his son and do all that for no reason. He sent him to bless you in turning away every one of you from your iniquities. That's a powerful statement. It's a powerful act. He's done more than just be that pillar of fire, parting water, all of those powerful miracles. He's done so much more. His long suffering is heartbreaking when you look at what we've done to him and his word and his truth. It's time to come back to the truth. And like the Messiah said, having both hands on the plow, don't look back. It's so easy to look back. This world has a lot of things out there, like the tree of knowledge and good and evil. Like, hey, look, it's good fruit. Okay, be mindful that there's only one path. You don't have to look back. I think that keeps so much of us back. It kept me back when you keep 1 foot off that path. 1 foot sort of in the grave, as I like to call it. Both feet go in the same direction as your eyes, hands on the plow. It's a good analogy, because that plow, what's the purpose of a plow? It's so you can plant seeds, right? And that's why a couple verses later, we're told that the harvest is great, but the laborers are few. And this was one of the first messages I ever spoke on back when I was a scared young teenager trying to preach. It was my one attempt back then. And so I realized I'm not a public speaker, and this is probably not for me, is to speak in public. But, times have changed and there's more of an urgency now. And so that harvest is still great. The laborers are still few. And some of you, we all have our own different tasks, our own different ways of laboring. Some of us are just planting seeds. You're out there all day sharing things with people, planting seeds. But it's the Most High that brings life with his breath of life to the harvest. And so I want to conclude with those words and thank all of you for going through this study with us. It is a powerful study showing us where we are with the generations of the heaven and of the earth, and what that most likely means when we look at the creation account in Genesis when it says that these are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created. So powerful stuff, telling us where we are, what's about to happen. And I can sense, like many of you, that it's soon. And so we need to be ready, and we need to be seeking the truth and staying humble, because like the Messiah says, the greatest in the kingdom of heaven are those that are humble. So thank you, family. This has been an honor. I'm blessed to be a part of this conference and this journey. I look forward to answering some questions and asking some questions, because I still have a lot of questions with you guys and the Bible scholars that are involved in this conference. It's a phenomenal experience. I hope you all enjoy it as much as I am already, and I look forward to watching these things unfold and seeing the Days of Noah series as it comes out for the first time here pretty soon. So we will see you guys around.
If ye shall ask anything in my name, I will do it. If ye love me, keep my commandments. And I will pray the Father, and he shall give you another Comforter, that he may abide with you forever. Even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it seeth him not, neither knoweth him. But ye know him, for he dwelleth with you, and shall be in you. I will not leave you comfortless. I will come to you. He that hath my commandments, and keepeth them, he it is that loveth me. And he that loveth me shall be loved of my Father, and I will love him, and will manifest myself to him. If ye keep my commandments, ye shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments, and abide in his love. These things have I spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy might be full. They were gathered together. Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him, and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. And hereby we do know that we know him, if we keep his commandments. He that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments, is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoso keepeth his word, in him verily is the love of God perfected. Hereby know we that we are in him. He that saith he abideth in him ought himself also so to walk, even as he walked. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. For whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world, and this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God, and the faith of Jesus. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. And behold, one came and said unto him, Good Master, what good thing shall I do, that I may have eternal life? And he said unto him, Why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, that is God. But if thou wilt enter into life, keep the commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments.